This just walks you through some of the steps to install a server. Even if you're using a single page application, you'll need some server, unless perhaps you're using Node.js or what servers are folks thinking about using to host their React or their single page applications? Node? Node? You're using Node as well? What do you guys folks do using back there? The ones using React? Using React, right? Hosted on what server? Apache. Oh, okay. So this will work. All right. So to install it, obviously there's a free version of MySQL. If you search for a community server, you can download and install it. On a Mac, usually will go under user local. You'll also need to download the driver for whatever language or framework you're using. In this case, we're going to be using Java. So this is the Java connector, but certainly you have connectors for Node.js. You have connectors for any number of frameworks, for any language that you can think of. This one in particular is the connector for Java. It's called the connector J. And you'll want to download the platform-independent version if you're using Java, so that it can run on any JVM on any operating system. You'll need to copy it locally somewhere where you can find it, usually in the class path or add it to your path. Here I copied under user local lib. So that's a very common place to put it. As long as you remember where you put it. It doesn't really matter where you put it, just you need to remember where you put it. You'll also need to install Tomcat, which again, you'll choose whatever server you want to use, but Tomcat is it's a standard implementation of the Java server, so certainly it's a good choice. They are up to version 9. You can download the 9.01. And if you click on the zip file, it'll download, and you can unzip it and copy it to your local system. A common place to put it is under user local, just Apache Tomcat. Once you have that, if you want to use your database, the driver, whatever driver you're using, whether it's Postgre or MySQL or regardless of what vendor or framework, you'll need to copy it under the lib directory of the Apache. So Apache has its own lib directory. You'll copy the library under there, and it'll be available to Apache when it starts. When it boots up, it'll read this library and make it available to its instance, to the instance server. Once you've done that, you'll need to create a server. Again, this is regardless of what if you're using a single page application or using a server-side application, you'll both need to do the same thing. You'll need to create a web project where you can host a server. You can run a server. In this particular case, we're going to be using Tomcat. It's very easy. You just you'll need to create a server. You can say new server and give it a name. In this particular case, Tomcat, you'll need to navigate to where Tomcat is and tell it where the directory where Tomcat is installed. Once you do that, you can start creating a dynamic web project where you can do your coding. And so let's demo doing all this. Okay, so let's create here a dynamic project, web project, and I'll call it CS4500 for this, just for this lecture. and you'll need to point it to the server, whatever server you had created earlier. And you'll need to ask it to generate a web.xml file at the end, so you can configure your server and your application. You can create it by hand later, but it's easier if you ask to create it at the beginning. This is a standard web component configuration file. Once you've created, you can now just create your very first index page where you can host, again, single page applications or server-side applications. So here I'm just going to create a little HTML file just to test that we are indeed have a server running. And you can, so I think I had a server running already. You can execute that index file on the server. Up to this point, this is the same whether you're using server-side J2EE or if you're using client-side React or Angular. This is the same setup for both frameworks. Right? If you're using client-side applications, in your index file, you would be loading all sorts of JavaScript libraries, your Angular or React or whatever MVC JavaScript library you would be using. You would be loading them right here in this index page. Okay. In this case, I'm going to demo doing it from the server side. If we have time, we can also demo doing it from the client side as well. All right. So this is a server side demo that I'm going to give, meaning that pages that you can create here are dynamic and rendered on the server. They execute on the server, as opposed to for those that are doing React or doing Angular or some other client side, the pages are dynamically rendered on the client side. So first I'll demo how to do it from the server side. Being able to render dynamic content. You have just dynamic strings. Message 1, message 2, and then you can just iterate over it dynamically. Now, like all dynamic content, usually we are embedding and mixing different languages. In this case, it's Java mixed in with HTML. If you're using Angular or React, it'll be JavaScript mixed in with, or some of the directives mixed in with HTML. You'll need to they'll have whatever template language you're going to be using. There'll be some mechanism by which you can distinguish whether you are in one language or the other language. In this case, it's the pointy brackets and percent that allows you to render data from one language into the other language. So in this case, we're just displaying the different messages. And you can embed it. You can embed static content like UL and LI and other HTML elements mixed in with Java or any other framework that you'd be using. So if we run this, right, it dynamically renders that. Anyway, so what we want to be able to do is access data from a database, and let's demo doing something like that. First, let's create a database on MySQL. I don't know, let's call it CS 4500. And let's create a couple of tables in there. Let's do something a little more interesting. Let's create a table for courses, sections, students and enrollments. So if we're creating a course, you might have there a unique identifier. Auto increment, it's easier if you tell the database to auto increment your data, so you don't have to deal with the ID. You can have the name of the course. You can have maybe a description for the course. And maybe a code. A code for the course. Let's maybe create a couple of dummy data for this table. Maybe this is maybe intro to databases, and the code is CS5200. Let's apply. Let's create a couple more. Software engineering. This is CS4500. Let's create a couple more. Web dev. CS5610. Just those three. If you had some kind of relationship where perhaps one course might have multiple sections, you would perhaps create a completely different table to track that information, where you might have an ID for uniquely identifying the section, automatically incremented, plus perhaps the section might have a name, and it might also have a relationship back to the course saying that this particular section is for that particular course. So one course might have multiple sections, so this might have a foreign key back to the back to the course that it belongs to. So we might have we might also have to declare the keys for the relationship that's saying that this section belongs to that course. So this what did I call it? Course ID. So let's create a key. This might be course key relating to the course, and we'll say that course ID is going to refer to that course, saying that. So it's a pointer. It's like a pointer saying that this section refers to that course, and you might have any number of sections for a particular course. So let's apply that. And so it creates a section. So let's create two sections maybe. And let's see. Name, this might be section 4500, section 1. And the course ID that it belongs to is 1. And maybe another section, section 2 for 4500 for the same course. So yeah, we have two sections for the same course. So this is a common one-to-many relationship that you would have in UML, right? Maybe a diamond going out from the course out to the section, or one-to-many cardinality. So typically you might want to be able to manage these relationships, such as being able to create a number of courses, and then for a particular course, being able to add any number of sections to that course. So let's see how we can do that from programming it. First, we'll need to model the data and keep track of the piece of information. So let's model it using Java in this case. We'll put it under package education.model, and we'll put there course, and we'll provide any number of fields to represent each one of the data points in the database. So we have an integer for the ID, We have a string for the name, a string for the code, a string for the description. So pretty much what we did last Monday. So let's just add this real quick. And add also the constructors for this. So let's just choose all of them, and let's choose also the couple more constructors. Perhaps one with no ID. Okay, so we have the constructor. So let's then once we have the data representation for whatever, obviously we would need also one for section. We will need also the DAOs that deal with all the CRUD operation for each one of these. So let's create a couple of DAOs for this. Under here, this will be under data access objects, and this is the course DAO, and maybe a main function to test it out. Now, one common design pattern in DAOs is that typically these should behave as singletons, right? Where there's only one instance of these objects to go around. You don't instantiate this every time you need one. Instead, they're instantiated once, and then you just reuse it throughout the infrastructure. So to implement a singleton, we can declare a local instance that we can instantiate in a private constructor. So meaning we make the constructor private so that no one can actually instantiate this from wherever they're using it. Instead, they would be getting it from a private static. There's only one of these. From a private function that allows you to create that static. Oh, just constructor. It's just private. Where we're going to be able to instantiate it if it's not already instantiated. If it's already there, we're just going to return that one instance. So this returns an instance of a course DAO, get instance, that checks to see if the instance is currently null. So if it's null, if the current instance is null, then it instantiates it. Otherwise, it just returns it. It just says return the instance. So now anyone who wants to use it would only ever use this get instance, right? That checks to see if it's already there. If it's there, it returns that one instance. Never actually instantiating it from outside. So this is a very common pattern of using either when you create a service that talks to a server to go fetch data. Or you create a data access object. It's a very common pattern to make these objects singletons. All right. So what else? What we want to be able to do here as a DAO is handle all the CRUD operations about courses. Well, I want to be able to create, remove, update, select. Some of the more common ones that we want to be able to handle are be able to create a new DAO, a new course. So let's see how we would do that. And one common thing to do is to declare all SQL commands as constants that can then be reused at a later time. So let's first do an easy one like retrieve for me all courses. That would be something like select star from course. Okay. So let's implement that. For that, we'll need to use the current driver that we just installed. Although I don't believe I added it. the build path so that we can build our code, our Java code, onto the on top of the SQL. Then we'll need to add the library, the MySQL library, as a dependency. Folks are using React. What are you using for the server to access the database? I'm sorry? Oh, right. You're using it in browser local storage. Is that what you're using? Okay, so it's only members on that one browser. Okay. The folks that are using Angular, what are you using a database at all? I'm sorry? Vue. Okay. I'm sorry? You know? Okay. Anyone else using MVC, JavaScript? Using Angular, but on the server, what are you using? How are you getting data for Angular? Where's Angular getting the data from? I'm sorry?
So we have a Java server.
A Java server? Right, so but the Java server is, how is it, are you doing some kind of web service to retrieve data?
Yeah, so it'll be like a HTTP
REST? Okay, so but in the database is the database NoSQL or MySQL? So you'll need to convert whatever Java has into JSON. Is that okay? All right. So then this is useful for you on the server side at least. Okay. So I was going to add the library, and the library is local lib. There we go. All right, so the driver class that you'll need to load, it'll be a string, and it'll be com.my.mysql. This is all documented in the slides. jdbc driver. So this is the driver, and we'll need also the username and password to log in. Private static string username. I created a user called CS4500 with the same password. Okay. So we have that. Then to retrieve the data. We'll create various functions here. We'll create all the CRUD operations. We'll have a public array list course that can retrieve find all courses. Also here you want to be able to create a course. Create course, actually no, just int, create a course, so it can take as argument as a course. So all the various CRUD operations would go here. So you would have also here being able to remove a course, delete course. Perhaps you provide an ID of the course that you want to remove, so course ID. Here you will have also maybe update a course. And maybe also the new course data. Oops. And probably we want to also retrieve one course if we have their ID. So public course find course by ID. Okay. So all operations would be handled through this one DAO. Right? It would be a bad practice that anytime you want to access the database, you would just do a connection wherever you feel like it. Instead, it would be all encapsulated in one single place. So let's implement just a few of these. Let's just here return -1, all these. To null for now, so that we can just focus on just one of these, right? Array list course, retrieving all the courses. So let's include all these, and let's create first an empty array where we can put all the courses. Courses. And just return courses for now. And let's now get a hold of the courses from the database, and we'll do we'll first have to load the driver. So we'll do a class dot for name and load the driver class. We'll need to put a try catch block around it. We'll need to grab a connection. So let's declare connections up here as well. If you are using MySQL, careful when you import this class. There's two versions. There's the MySQL version, com.mysql.jdbc. Instead, we want to import this one, the one that says java.sql, not the one from MySQL. Okay, the first one, the java.sql, is an interface, whereas the other one is the actual class that implements that interface. So you have to import the interface instead. We'll also need a statement. Now, last time we met, I showed you how to use statements. Instead of statements, it's preferably that you use prepared statements instead of just statements. They're useful for avoiding SQL injection, especially folks that are filling out forms that are to make sure that the data is valid, that we don't have any weird characters in there. Prepared statement is a better choice. Let me load that. Also here, careful, don't load the MySQL implementation, but the Java SQL interface instead. We'll need also a result set. And again, same deal. It's the one that says Java SQL. All right, so now that we have that, we can now grab a connection from the driver manager, and we'll use the URL. We'll need that. Let's create the URL where the database lives. So db URL, and it'll be jdbc mysql : // If you're using Postgres, it'll be jdbc : Postgres. So here would be localhost, and it's the database. What we called it CS4500, I think. All right. Actually, did I provide a username for this? I did. All right. So now that we have a connection, we can, and the URL would be db URL plus the username, plus the password. Add catch. All right, so now that we have the connection, we can now execute the query. We can say, we can ask the connection to prepare the statement. In this particular, the statement we want to prepare is this one, to be able to select all the courses from the database, and it's called find all courses. So let's prepare that. So we'll say prepare statement, and we'll provide the find all courses. And this will compile the statement so that we can then execute it. we'll store it in the statement variable. Once we have the statement, we can then actually execute it. We can say statement execute query and store the result in the result set. All right, once we have the result set, we can iterate over it. Retrieving. Now, when the result set comes back, the jdbc keeps track of a cursor of which row am I looking at. Not until there's this next function call will the cursor be pointing at any one row. It's pointing what it's called a before first row. And every time you call next, it advances the cursor to the next row. Now, if you have hundreds or thousands of records, the result set won't have all the records all at once, since the database can potentially have gigabytes of data, of rows. Instead, result set just goes and fetches 10 records at a time, and it caches them in memory, and it gives you the illusion of being able to iterate over thousands and thousands of records. When it reaches a threshold, it goes and fetches the next batch of rows. Okay, so now we can retrieve all the pieces of data, like the ID for the course. So result set get integer ID, the name of the course, get string, and it's the name column called name. We can retrieve the code from the code column and retrieve the description. Result set get string, and this is description. Now that we have all the data, we can instantiate the course, providing all the data information such as the ID, name, code, and description. And I don't know if they're declared in that particular order. New course. Remove argument. String, 3 strings. ID and 3 strings. Okay, we have the course and we can add it to the list of courses. So courses.add course. And once we have that, we are ready to return the courses. But before we retrieve it, we send it back, we are going to close everything behind us in reverse order. Right, so we opened result set last, we close it first. So it has to be in that order. Right? And the connection. All right, so there we go. We have the courses. Let's just to verify that this works. We can go back to we can just run it from the command line here in the main. Just get a hold of the course DAO, cDAO, and we use the static instance to get a hold of the instance. So we say get instance, and once we have that, we can then retrieve the list of courses from the DAO. And we can just print it out to see what we get. If we run this as a command at the command line, as a Java application, it comes back with an array of the courses. All right. All right. Just to make this a little bit easier to read, these can be converted. We can add a toString at the end, just to see that indeed those are the courses. we can just return maybe the name of the course when we are printing it as a string. So let's run that again. The course DAO, if we run it, there they are. They're the 3 courses in just plain old string. All right, so let's see how this can be rendered in a user interface. So last time we met, I showed you how to do it from a JSP, but that was bad practice. Just want to show it to you again where we were, and then contrast on how you would actually do it. So this is a course list. It's a JSP that allows us to dynamically render content. So first we'll do what you shouldn't do. You can access the DAO right from here, but you shouldn't. But let's do it anyway. So here's the course DAO. This is course DAO.getInstance. So pretty much what we did in our main class. So I'm just going to copy it right here. Right, if you've seen the design patterns, the model view controller design patterns, this is breaking the model view controller design pattern. We have the view directly accessing data from the model. Okay, but let's do it just for illustration purposes. Let's load the DAO right from the view. So in this case, the JSP is playing the role of the view. So we are going to import the model, which you shouldn't do. So we have here, it's, what's it called? CS4500 DAO. So I loaded all the DAOs, and I'm also going to load the model as well. So it's CS4500 education.model. Okay, there we go. And lastly, we're going to load the array list over here. So let's load that as well. It's java.util.ArrayList. Okay. Get instance. Get instance is, it should be public, so I can use it outside to get an instance. All right. Once I have that, it's trivial now to just render this. Just by using just plain old ULs and just iterating over this. So for int I 0 I less than courses at size and I++. We get a hold of the course. So this will be courses.getI. And once we have that, we can just render it using just plain old line items, and this will be just a course name, get name. So this is pretty much what we did last Tuesday. So let's run this JavaScript JSP, and I'll restart the server. Right, so we have the three courses listed here in the JSP, right? So again, this is breaking MVC, and you should try to avoid breaking the design patterns. Again, we saw a couple of ones, right? We already saw the Singleton design pattern, right? That you have just one of these instances throughout the framework, and here we are going to use the JSP to implement the view, the V in the MVC. So one of the things that we should not do is access the model directly. Instead, in MVC, you should have some controller that is responsible for handling data, to provide data for the view, to handle any events that the user generates, any intentions that the user has to modify any of the data would be handled by some intermediate controller, and then it's the controller's responsibility to go and either do it itself or delegate that to some service to manipulate the data on its behalf. So to do that, let's create a controller. The easiest way to create a controller is through using a servlet. So let's create a servlet. And this controller is going to handle everything that has to do with courses, right? Being able to create courses, remove courses. Controllers serve to be in that boundary between the human being interacting at a very low bandwidth, generating clicks and drags and key presses, and converting that low bandwidth world into an object-oriented world, right? It's a layer between those two worlds. So let's create a course controller. Oh, sorry. And this will be the package. I'm going to just put it under CS 4500 controllers. Okay. All right. So here's the boilerplate for the servlet. And we can just run it on the server just to see what its default implementation does. If we just run it, it'll run it on the server as a URL request. There it is. So it's hitting the server at CS4500/course controller, and right now it's just spitting out CS4500. That's all it's doing. So what we want to do here is have it handle multiple actions. We're being able to retrieve data from the data model. So we have the three tiers, right? We have the JSP serving as a view, the servlet serving as a controller, and our DAO and classes serving as the model, right? Right. And the original intent when servers just came out and were trying to figure out how to divvy up applications into scalable, more complex enterprise applications, they came up with this architectural design pattern that allows you to divide the various concerns of dealing with humans, dealing with data, dealing with the various actions, and how they get translated into data transformation. All right, so we have that. Let's stop the server. Well, anyway. So here it is. So here's our servlet. It has a lot of boilerplate code. I'm going to remove. It's just makes it harder to read. I'm just going to remove that. That's a constructor. This one over here. This method over here handles any incoming HTTP GET requests, meaning is intended for any read operations. If you want to retrieve data from the server, this is where you would send back data from the server, from the database. So this is the same if you're using single-page applications or server-side applications. Here, if you're using a client-side single-page application solutions like React or Angular, you would be returning JSON data from here. Okay. If instead you're using a server-side technology like we're doing right now, instead this is going to go out to the data model and put the data in a place where the servlet, where the JSP view can then render it. Okay, so let's move the code that we had here, this course DAO and retrieving the courses. It shouldn't live here, so instead we're going to move it to where it should be. We're going to move it over to the servlet side. So we're going to cut it out from here. We're going to go out to to our servlet and instead do that work right here. We're going to grab the DAO here, and let's import all the classes that we need. Here's the DAO for the course. Let's import the data model. Let's load the array list from util. Okay, now we have the courses. That's the default behavior for the servlet. Once we have the course, we have to put it in a place for the servlet, for the JSP, for the view to get a hold of it. Okay. If you're using Angular or React or any of these MVC libraries, you would use some kind of binding mechanism, put it in some scope that the client would be able to see it. Here, since it's a server-side solution, this is handling a request that is coming from the client, and then there's a view that needs to render this, right? So as part of the same request, right? So a request comes in. I want to see the list of all the courses, and once the controller gets a hold of the list of the courses, it wants to send it over to the view. So let's do that. One place to put it is in the request itself. We can set an attribute called courses, so that when it gets to the view can get a hold of this list of courses for rendering. Okay, and then the next thing would be that we want to send the request to the view that is going to actually render this, right? To do this, we're going to dispatch. We're going to send grab the view that I want to display. In this particular case, is our course list. Course list. That's the page that we want to render, and we want to create a dispatch. We want to send both the request and the response to the view for rendering. So the request comes in, it hits our server. Our servlet handles it, and then it just forwards it back to the view. Yes.
So when you, in the set attribute, when you send the courses to be in the view,
Yeah.
you're using the course class, which is part of the model. And
Yes.
You're sending that to the view, which
Yeah.
means the view.
The view gets the data. Yeah. The view gets data.
But doesn't that mean that the view is coupled to the model?
Yeah, so the thing is that the view should not decide what to display. The view should not decide what am I going to fetch. It's somebody else's decision to decide what is it that I want to display, right? So the controller is making the decision that this is what you should display based on some business logic, based on some criteria, right? It puts it in a package, whatever package we want it, and then sends it over to the view. Hey, view, out of the 1,000 courses, these are the 3 that I want you to show. Okay? It could be a collection or array list, but some representation.
But it's okay that it's dependent on the data representation.
Yes, you could have also if that object doesn't have any logic, which ours doesn't, then it's perfectly fine. If the object has logic, business data in there, then ideally you would have an additional layer object in between, usually referred to as the transfer object. The data transfer out, DTOs, right? That the only thing that it has is attributes, right? No business, no logic, no anything. It's only for containing data, right? In our case, since it's a fairly trivial example, our course is also only a data transfer object. Yeah. But typically, yes, you would perhaps do the conversion into a DTO. The DTO also might have view-specific information that the model would not. Right? In there, perhaps you might have how you want to display it. Right? Any formatting could live in there as well. Right? That's only useful for the view, but not necessarily for the model. Yeah. So let's load the request dispatcher, and we want to go to the course list, and we want to dispatch there. Okay. So on the view. Going back to the view, we're not going to access the courses from the DAO. Right? Instead, we're going to retrieve it from the request. Somebody put it there. The controller is responsible for putting it there. So we're going to do a request dot get attribute. So on the controller, we did a set. Here we're doing a get. Get attribute, and it was called courses. Okay. The attributes, when they're stored, since you can store anything you want, you'll need to cast it back to the original data type that was put in there. In this case, it's an array list course. Okay. And now we can iterate over this. All right. So let's go back to the servlet and run it again on the server. So there it is. So it's the same thing we had earlier, only that the concerns have been decoupled, right? The list only concerns on how it's going to be displayed, whereas the controller only concern is where to get the data and responding to some actions. Right now, this is the default action to always retrieve the list of courses, but certainly we want to implement all the various operations, such as being able to create new courses, delete courses, update courses, do all sorts of other things, right? So let's go on and implement maybe creating a brand new course. So let's do that. Let's go back to the course list and create maybe a simple form for us to be able to create a new course. So this is H1 list of courses. Let's create a little form here, and this is going to go back to our servlet. So all actions are going to be handled by our servlet, and our server lives at course controller, right? And it's going to post. We're going to create an input field here where we can create the name of the course. So the name of this input field is name, and maybe a placeholder saying that, giving us a hint that we want to have the course name typed in there. Maybe another input field for the code. Course code. And then maybe a text area for us to type in the description. Here would be name description. All right, let's see if we can render that. Go back to this and refresh. It displays like that. Let's add also an additional button there so we can submit this as a button. So button, and this will be create course, and this will be to submit this. So this will be a submit. All right, so we're going to post this when it goes out to the servlet. We need to be able to handle this. Since it's a post, the servlet is going to handle it not in this do get, it's going to handle it in this do post down here. Notice that the common thing to do here is to whatever the do post does after the do post is done. Usually, a common thing to do is to just forward the request and response to the get, so that it finally the get sends it over the request to be rendered on the view. So anyway, so in this do post, we can get a hold of the attributes that we just sent over across the wire. We can grab the name of the course from attributes and incoming as a parameter. They're being passed as parameters. So we can say request dot get parameter, and the parameter is name. We have three parameters. We have name. We have what else? We have code, and we have description. Okay. Once we have that, we should be able to now tell the model to add this brand new course to the database. So we can say grab the DAO, which is an instance. It's the same instance as above. We can say DAO, cDAO, create course, and we pass in the course. Actually, we never instantiate it. Let's instantiate it. Course, new course, and we don't care about the ID. because it's going to be created by the database. We're going to pass in the name, the code, and the description. And we're going to pass it along to the create course. So that's going to, presumably, it's going to do an insert, right? But I don't believe we implemented it. Let's actually implement it. Let's go back to the course, the create course. Here we're going to do an insert into a database. And so we'll need that SQL. We don't have it here. Let's write it as a template here. So private static string create or insert create course. So we're going to insert into a database, insert into course, and the following fields: name, code, and description, with the following values. So this is going to be a template, so we're going to put placeholders here, question mark, question mark, question mark. Those question marks are going to be filled in, right, by the create course function, right, as arguments that are being passed along in the function, right? So let's go back here in the create course. So we're going to maybe declare here a result equal to -1, and then we're going to return the results. So by default it's -1. But meanwhile, we're going to try to insert into that, right? So let's do that. Let's let's load the driver. Driver. We'll put that into a try catch. We'll grab a connection from the driver manager. Get connection using the create the DB URL, the username, okay. Let's add a surrounding catch. Let's now prepare the statement, the insert statement. We need to prepare it and fill in those blanks. Okay. So we're going to create the statement, the statement here. We say connection dot prepare the statement for insertion. So create course, there it is. And we have to fill in those three blanks, those three placeholders. So the first placeholder, we say statement dot set string. So the first placeholder, notice it's a 1, not a 0. This is the index of that placeholder. And in SQL, jdbc, it's indexed at 1, not 0. Careful. So we'll set the first string. We'll set it to course.get the name. Same thing we'll do for the other 3 strings. So the second string will be the code. The third string will be the description. Okay, so now the statement is ready. It has those values. These setters, they understand they need to add the quotations or not quotations depending on the data type. And they know that if it's a number, you don't need quotations. If it's a number, you need the quotations. They know how to handle the different data types, dates, booleans, and all the various data types. That's why prepared statements are a better solution than just plain old statements like we looked at on Tuesday. All right, now that we have the statement all ready to go, we're going to execute. In the previous one, we executed a query, retrieving data. In this case, we're executing an update into a database. So we're execute an update. Updates include all inserts, updates, deletes. For the query, it's only the select. Okay. All right, so now that we executed the query, presumably the data has been inserted into the database. And we can now start closing all the resources behind us. So we're done with the statement, so let's close the statement. And don't forget to close behind you, otherwise you'll leave these connections open and somebody else might complain. Right, so we close everything behind us. All right, so let's play around with this. we created a create course. Let's go back to the servlet. This is the servlet is going to call the create course. This is presumably going to insert, and then it's going to delegate to the doGet. The doGet is going to retrieve again all the list of courses. So presumably, after you insert, we should see the brand new course listed down below. So let's execute this again on the server. And let's create another course here. C++. Create course, and it failed. The origin server did not find a current. Oh, did I? Maybe. I think maybe this is a relative path, not an absolute path. Okay, there it is. So the new course was added. So course 1, 2, 3 adds it to each one of them. Right? And if we go to the database, we can verify that the courses are there. The new ones that we added there. Okay. All right. So we have at least we have two of the CRUD operations. We have the create. We have one of the read operations, which is retrieve all of them. That's the find all. Usually they're referred to in the literature as finders. They all start with find, followed by some criteria. So I find all obviously means I want all of them unfiltered. But you can create all numbers of finders. Find by ID is another one that's very common. Retrieve one single instance by ID. But you can retrieve by any criteria you might care. By year of graduation, by major, by whatever. Right? You create finder methods that would encode your particular criteria that you want to find it. All right, so let's now create maybe being able to delete a course. So let's do that next. So to do that, perhaps we want to add a link at the end that you can click, a button that you can click to remove. So let's see, here at the end of the LI, we can maybe create a link that if you click on it, you can remove a particular course. So to do that, we can point to the controller. You can say course controller is the one who handles all my data access, data management. Again, the view's responsibility is only for rendering. It doesn't know how to delete, doesn't know how to create. It delegates everything back to the controller. So for deletion, it's going to go back to the controller, and it needs to pass in some data to, for instance, the ID of the course that we want to remove. So for instance, we can encode that information as part of the URL. So this will be the current course that we're iterating over, and get the ID. Okay, so that if we re-render this, right? If we hover over the delete, you'll notice that the ID is encoded in the URL. So they're all there. Right now, nothing happens. If I click on it, it just comes back and displays the list again. So instead, what we need to do is add maybe additional encoding to tell it what do we want to do with that ID. Right? Because there could be several actions that we want to do. Right? Maybe we want to update it, we want to delete it, we want to do all sorts of things. In this case, we want to remove it. So we're going to encode our intention as part of the query as well, perhaps with a action equal delete ampersand, right? And we can then parse that out as a parameter back in the controller. So this is a get, right? Every link generates a get request. So when we get here, we can parse the action. We can say string action. We can say from the request dot get parameter called action. And here we can ask what action do we want. So we might say if the action is delete, then we're going action. If the action is delete, then we need the ID. Otherwise, we don't need the ID. Well, or I guess we can parse it anyway, just in case we need it. It might be null. The ID. We're going to check to see if the ID is not null. And you can do some other more validation. If it's not empty, is it actually a number? If it's so, we're going to, and we'll say that this is maybe a string representation. And I want to convert it back into an integer. Parse the ID string. Now that I have the ID, I can now go back to my DAO and say, please remove that course. We can say cdao dot delete. We don't have it. Oh, it's down here. And pass in the ID of the course. All right, this is going to go out to the database. It's going to do a delete from the database. It's going to come back and provide you, and then it's going to go and presumably list again all the courses again. So everything from the servlets on, right, is reusable by either where you're doing client-side development or server-side development. The only part here that is different from folks that are doing client-side development using React or Angular would not be using a JSP. Right? They would be doing all the rendering of the HTML. They would be doing it on the client side. Okay? Here we're doing the rendering on the server side. But everything else, the controller, handling any HTTP requests for data, and data access and whatnot, that would be the same. All right, so let's. I don't believe we actually implemented delete course. Right now, it's not doing anything. So for now, well, let's declare here a integer result -1, and then return here the results. Actually, what I meant to do here is that when you execute the update, this returns an integer, giving you whether it was successful or not, how many records were affected by that particular update. Right? So you wouldn't actually return -1. It's whatever that execution returns. All right. So in the delete, let's create a delete statement. So this will be private static string delete course, and this will be delete from course where the ID is blank. Right? Again, we're going to use a prepared statement to fill in that blank. So that's going to look very much like our create. So I'm just going to copy the code for create, because it looks very, very similar. The only difference here is that we are using the delete course, and we are not filling in these strings. Instead, we are filling in an integer, the first placeholder, with the ID, with the course ID argument that we're passing in. Right? That's the only difference. And then we are updating, right? We're executing the update. That's going to come back with any number of records that were removed, hopefully just one. Because we are removing by primary key, and we should not see that course anymore. So let's go back to the course controller, and let's refresh. Let's click on one of these, and indeed we can remove the courses. Okay. So now we have 3 of the 4 or 5 CRUD operations. We can delete, we can read all, we can create. We still want to look at whether we can update or retrieve a single one of them. So let's look at being able to update. To be able to update, first you need to be able to see what's already in the database. Right? For instance, presumably clicking on one of these and selecting it to see the name, the code, the description, so that we can then update it. All right, so let's do that first. Let's go fetch the current data. So where this might be just a summary of the record, right? Where the record might have many, many, many different fields, and we want to populate our form with whatever's in the database. So let's do that. Let's add a button to be able to retrieve. Right. So let's add a new button here where we can select. Okay, and we'll use a different action instead of delete. This might be select. Okay, select that particular course. Right. So now, again, this is going to be another get request. So on the controller, we're going to be looking for that action right here on the do get, and the action will be select. If it's select, so we'll do an else if. The action. We can again, we need to parse that string. Perhaps we can generalize this a little bit so that perhaps it's in a function that just parses the integer if it's successful. So here we parse the integer, and we're going to now retrieve the course, a particular course. So we want to maybe find the course, find a course, find course by ID. We're going to pass the ID for that course, right? And we're going to store it in a local variable, course. Okay, we're going to store it right here, course. Right? Find course by ID doesn't exist, so let's implement it. Let's go back to our DAO, and let's implement find course by ID. It's going to look very, very similar to find all courses. So let's copy that. So again, another finder method. So this was find not all courses, but find by ID. And again, you might have many different finder methods depending on what you specifically need for your implementation. But these are the most common ones. These are the 5 most common finder methods. So we have here the integer course ID, and it's going to return just a single course. It's going to go and fetch it's going to use, instead of find all courses, it's going to use find by ID, which we didn't implement it. Let's implement that query. So this will look very similar to find all courses. So this is find by ID, select course where the ID is equal to a placeholder. Okay. All right, so now in the find by ID, there it is, my prepared statement. I'm going to fill in that placeholder and say statement dot set integer. Set integer. The first placeholder, I'm going to set it to course ID. So this is going to iterate over it. Hopefully, it'll just find 1. So my array of courses is really just 1. So the course that I want will be the first one. I could make this a little more efficient, but let's set it to the first one. So I'm going to just return. I can just return courses dot get the first one. Presumably, it's just 1 came back, right? So perhaps I don't even need the array, right? I could make it simpler. All right, so it's the first one. Oh no, get 0, right? The first one is 0. So we have that. So from the controller's point of view, oop, I have an error somewhere. Course. Oh, I have this. I don't need this really. From the controller, let's go back to the controller. Now find course by ID should be there. It doesn't find it. Why is it not finding it? Remove, change the method. Find course by ID. No? Dot. Oh, find by ID. I called it find by ID. Sorry. So I pass in the ID here. Once I have the course, I can set it in as an attribute so that the back in the view, I can retrieve it and render my form with the data from the database. So I can say request dot set attribute course, and then the course I just retrieved. Okay. So hopefully on the client side, I can retrieve the course from the attribute. So course. I guess I can declare. I can just keep one of them. It's from the request, so I'm going to cast it back to course from the request. Get attribute and retrieve course. Now that I have the course, get attribute. Now that I have the course, I can parse out those pieces that I need to render my form. But notice my form is way up here. So maybe I can move some of this code up here. I'm going to move this up here. Now that I have the course, I can render these input fields with the values that are coming from the database. Right? I can set their values. Value with course. Oh well, it might be that the course is null because maybe I haven't selected anything yet. So I think it's better to just piecemeal retrieve each one of these. So string name will be it'll be nothing yet. String code, or just this could be null, I guess. Description, and if the course is not null, then I can set the values here. So name will be the course.getName. We can get a hold of the code, course.getCode, and the description. All right. Then I can then populate my form with those values, with the name. Same thing for the code. And same thing for the text area. Description. Okay. All right, let's see if this blows up. Let's refresh. If I select, all right, so it populates the form as I select the particular course that I want to edit, right? So the last piece would be that I want to be able to update it. You know, I want to change the name, I want to change the code, or the description and whatnot, and I want to be able to resubmit the form, but with new data. So let's do that. So on the here we can in part of the form we can add an additional button, right? Another submit button, but then we need to be able to distinguish between which one you clicked. right? And the way we can distinguish them is that buttons, you can give them names. You say that the name for this button will be action, and then the value of the button when it gets submitted will be update. So this will be update course. So that we can, on the server side, when this gets posted to the server, we can look up for the attribute action. If it has the value of update, then we're going to be doing an update as opposed to it's a create. If we don't find an update, we'll assume that you're creating. Right? Or you can be more granular if you want, and add. If you want to be consistent, probably we also want to add name and value here. This is create, right? And have if else, whatever the different actions. We're also going to need, because this is an existing course. We need to pass also along the ID of the course that is being updated, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create an input field that can hold the ID, right? The ID, and we're going to populate it with the course that just came back from the server. The server has the ID. We can populate it here. Here we can create an int ID -1, but we can populate it with the real ID from the course. And populate this value for this field. So if we re-render that, and we click on these, I notice that the ID is being populated. Although it looks kind of weird. Typically, you shouldn't know or care what the ID for a record is. So what we're going to do is that we're going to hide it. Type hidden, so that it doesn't render. But it's still part of the form. So it's there. So as you select, we have a hidden field there, just to maintain state. Right. So this is the client maintaining state. Notice that the server doesn't remember that you have a particular course selected. Right. And most applications, you want to create them as stateless as possible. Right. You don't want to have the server having to remember anything. Right. At most, having to remember that it is you who's logged in and has these privileges, and that's it. But any state information, the more you burden the server on having to remember anything about your particular session, the less scalable your application in general would be. Since it might work fine for you on your laptop, on your database, your server, but when you talk about thousands of folks using the same server and having to remember stuff about every single person, it just needs much more resources. So typically, as much as possible, you want to delegate maintaining any state information off to the client. The client is maintaining the state, and it will provide it again when it comes back. Right? So in this case, yes, we are encoding all the state information on the client. The client will provide back the ID to remember what course are you talking about. Okay? So again, it's a very common design pattern as well to try and maintain a stateless server as much as possible. All right, so now we can, if we click on update, it's going to be handled here in this post. So right now the post only creates courses. So this is only a special case. If the action is not update, it would do this. But instead, if it is an update, then we'll need to do something else instead. So let's move maybe the DAO up here. We got the name, the code, the description. Let's grab also the ID in case we're updating something. So this is string ID as a string. So request dot get parameter request get parameter. And this is the ID parameter. Again, this might be null. If you're creating a new one, it could be null. But if you're updating, then it'll have some value. We also want the action. Can't type today. And if it's an update, right? If the action is an update, then we in both cases we want to create the course. Let's declare it up here. Let's declare the course variable here as null. Initialize it. But if it's an update, I need the ID. So let's create the ID. Let's parse the ID. Check if the ID string is not null. If it's not null, I'm going to parse it. Parse the ID string. And I'm going to create a new course with all the values, including the ID. Right? Now I have enough information to actually update. Go back to the server, to my data model, and say update the course with this new data. So we can go to cdao dot update course, and we pass the course ID, which is the ID right there, and the course object. Otherwise, if it's not an update, then this must be a create. Okay, and if it's a create, I do this. Right, what I used to do, just create a course with a dummy ID, and just call create course. So this too handles those two use cases. Okay. All right. So course ID update. I don't believe we implemented it. It would be implemented again with an update. Let's do that. So this would be update. Update course. Update course. I'm going to set the name to blank. The code to blank, and the description to blank. Okay, right? So I've set all the values, and then I would execute that. Let me see. Let's use create as a template for this. We can copy and just paste it and rename it to update course. Update course. The first argument is the ID, the course ID, and the next argument is the actual course with the new values. Okay? So, the update needs to have one more thing. We need to say where the ID of the course is that ID that we pass along. So we're going to set the name, the code, and the description. Update course. What is it complaining about? Rename update course. Update course. Did I misspell it? Delete course. Create course. Update course. What is it not liking? Results. Or did I misspell it in the course controller? Update course is that one. Duplicate method. Oh, did I already create one? Oh, I probably did, didn't I? Okay. I copied it. Did I run out of time?
5 minutes.
Course, where's update? Update, fine. Update course. There it is. You paste that in there. And so this will use the same thing, right? Instead of create course, it'll do update course, right? Which has that update string there. It'll set the name, the code, the description, plus it'll set that last placeholder with the course ID. It'll execute. Oh, it's not a string; it's an integer. Course ID. Then it'll close everything behind it and return the result. And that's being handled by the course controller, who's calling the update course with the ID and the course. And it will only execute if we pass in an update. Okay. So let's go back and refresh this. Okay. And let's select this course. And I spelled it wrong, so course 1, 2, 3. And click on update, and indeed it updates. Okay. So there you have it. So you have the 4+1 CRUD operations, right? The more common ones: create, read, update, and delete, plus find by ID. That allows you to do all the various operations of updating, creating, selecting, or removing existing data elements. All right. Okay. We can make this look a little more presentable. By putting maybe Bootstrap in there. By loading a library. So it loads just a little better fonts and whatnot. Maybe we can put it surrounded with some white space surrounding it. And we can paint the form elements a little better so that they look a little more presentable. And the buttons we can paint so they look a little better. So it starts to look like something that you might actually use. And the line items, also we can paint it. All right, so it starts to look like something a little more presentable. All right? All right, I'm going to leave it here, and I'll make this available later on today. Thanks.